what's going on, everybody? So today we're going to talk about some more news, but dude, things are starting to get real out there. I kind of tuned in and saw some news that had to do about Peru, rising prices and inflation, and rising oil prices down there, causing people to basically, it's causing civil unrest, which, according to some, it doesn't take much to do that down there, because that's kind of how they roll. They don't put up with much just because a large part of their population is, either slightly above the poverty line or mostly below it. So it doesn't take much to cause social unrest over there. And then obviously Sri Lanka, they're going through the similar thing. Their people are unhappy of the president's mismanagement of the economic funds and whatnot. According to some sources, I heard that they're actually completely out of gasoline, which I'm sure can't be 100% true, but maybe is close to. I kind of received some disturbing news yesterday that has to do with the grain transportation in the United States, and mostly what that deals with is for milk cows, dairy cows. So here's the skinny. So from my understanding from this news and how it works, there's an insider who has certain intel about it, and there's a couple different levels of commodities that hit the trains that are basically put into a couple different groups. And so it's nothing that would be too far off from what you could already imagine, as far as you have automobiles, you have your general commodities, electronics and items such as that. You also have grains, you got oil, and then there's a couple other ones in there too, but obviously those are probably the four that I was paying attention to the most. And according to some certain railway companies, on their contracts to deliver said items, in particular grain, they're stating, they're claiming force majeure in their contract, which is act of God for those who don't know. So every contract is made so that you have an act of God clause, things that can happen outside of your control that can affect you making good at the contract. I'm fairly familiar with this from my experience in the construction industry. I mean, that would cause some scheduling delays and whatnot, and usually the client was understandable, because force majeure in this case was used for COVID, and as the world's supply chain kind of cratered there, I mean, everyone was aware of what was going on. Well, now, 2 years later from that point, we have major railway companies that are claiming force majeure on the grain shipments that they've been contracted to deliver to dairy farms. Now, that is obviously concerning, but the info behind it is that the premiums paid for moving the grain is a whole lot lower than it would be to ship automobiles and construction supplies, and obviously oil. And that all makes perfect sense. So there's also some interesting back data with Biden working with the railway unions, and who knows what handshakes or what pockets were lined with money, or whatever. So that being said, it seems to me that the railway companies are claiming force majeure, saying that we're at a lack of workers because of the COVID lockdowns, and we had to let go a bunch of people, and now we can't so easily get those people back. And what I think happened, I'm just supposing here, is that maybe some direction was given to reallocate resources to move, construction commodities, oil, automobiles, things that are going to trickle down a lot of different ways to a lot of different companies and people, and also keep the economy going and thriving. And kind of took away from, these dairy farms. And I'm sure it's more than just that. I mean, grain is kind of a big deal. So that's what I think happened. But either way, whether what I think happened and what actually happened, if those are two different things or if they are the same thing, it doesn't really matter. Now, I heard this and heard that, it's insider information and that this source is going to come out and end up, making this news public, at which point it'll probably hit mainstream media. And when it does, it'll be, of course, blamed on a pariah, a black sheep. And so I wanted to verify what I heard for myself. And kind of seems, I mean, obviously I can't verify all that information, but if you can start seeing a pattern, then possibly the minutia could be true. So I went ahead and I went to USDA.gov and I looked for a grain transportation report. And originally I found one that was pretty old. And then I ended up finding this one from March 31st, 2022. And in the first paragraph, it kind of goes over some things that validated that news that I heard. So I'll go ahead and read that for you now. USDA and NGFA expressed concern to STB over rail service. On March 30th, the USDA expressed concern to the Surface Transportation Board, STB, over worsening rail service. An earlier, March 24th letter from the National Grain and Feed Association described significant rail service disruptions, including facilities that have been unable to ship out or receive grain by rail. According to STB's latest service metrics, posted March 23rd, train speeds for grain across the 4 major U.S. Class 1 railroads were 2% lower than prior years. Original dwell times for grain were up 60%, and the number of unfilled grain car orders was up 152%. At the same time, premiums paid in the secondary market for shuttle service have escalated significantly in recent weeks. For the week ending March 24th, bids offers were $2,500 higher than average for shuttle rail cars delivered in April and $1,200 higher for May. USDA urged STB take action in the immediate term to improve rail service and to move forward with the proceedings that would improve service in the future. Now, this intel, based off the previous intel that I got, that I heard, is all about these dairy cows. Dairy cows that, provide our milk and our cheese at the store. Now, these are not meat cows. And you got to know that most rural farmers are just naturally prepared for stuff that might happen. So I'm sure that they have some extra grain laying around somewhere that'll get them through a shipment delay. But that can only happen for so long until the inevitable question comes, well, these dairy cows need to be sent to slaughter because we can either have them as a total loss or we can utilize them for their meat and at least recoup that. Well, in order to get dairy cows into full production, it takes 8 years. So if something doesn't happen with this railway thing here soon and things don't turn around, and that's supposing that these farmers are well stocked and supplied. Ranchers are well stocked and supplied. Then that means we're going to go through a moment where we have very cheap beef, which is a sign that the shizzy just hit the fizzy. And then we're going to go through basically 8 years with a lack of dairy products. And that's best case scenario, right? So yeah, I wanted to go over that news with you. I can post the article, the report down in the description. You guys can take a look at that. Also have another table that I pulled up off of the grain transportation report, and I was just curious to see who are we shipping our wheat to. So it looks like number one is Mexico, and then the Philippines, Japan, Korea, Nigeria, China, Taiwan, Indonesia, Thailand, and Italy. I think Thailand is Thailand. And it shows a percent change too. So we have, a slight uptick in Mexico, but all across the board, with the exception of Nigeria, all the numbers are down. Nigeria is up 43% change. So basically Mexico and Nigeria, we're shipping extra to. All across the board, especially China and Indonesia, interesting tie there, we are down anywhere from 4 to 93% across the board. So we have all these other countries that either they're getting their grain from somewhere else, or we're saying, guess what? You don't get any more. I found that interesting. I can also post that down in the comment section. And then finally, I'm going to end here before it gets too long with a Reuters article. Says food crisis grows as spiraling prices spark export bans. So this is where we have other countries now that are all shuttering their exports, and it's kind of happening everywhere. So March 9th, the global food crisis sparked by Russian invasion of Ukraine escalated on Wednesday as Indonesia tightened curbs on palm oil exports, adding to the growing list of key producing countries seeking to keep vital food supplies within their borders. Man, if this doesn't just spell out, this is just the beginning of this geopolitical conflict. We haven't seen any actual effects except for, the prices at our gas pump and stores, uptick, at least for the food, anywhere from 7 to 20%, 30% on some items. This is the beginning. So you guys need to lock it up immediately. This is Prepperines. We'll talk to you next time.